Um, Hello, if you don't know me, my name is Kimberly Lutz, and it's my pleasure to introduce the Fall 2011 University Libraries LIS speaker, Haipeng Li. And let me just say a couple words about the University Libraries LIS Speakers Program. This is a program that's been going on for quite a number of years now, and it's a collaboration between the University Libraries and LIS, and we bring speakers of national, or in this case international, prominence to campus to speak to both staff and faculty at the libraries and faculty and students from the LIS. Later today, Haipeng Li will also be meeting with the ACE Scholars and doing a workshop with them, so we're very fortunate to have that. We should have news about spring 2012 soon, so you'll be getting an email from me in the near future. So Haipeng, who had a long and distinguished careers in libraries in the United States, from Arizona State to the University of Arizona to Oberlin to Rutgers Newark, is currently the university librarian at Hong Kong Baptist University. Known as a national and international leader in fostering diversity in library services, Haipeng, who's a former executive director of the Chinese American Librarians Association, was the founding co-director of the Diversity Research Center at the Dana Library at Rutgers Newark. That's a center that promoted the value of diversity in education, organizational performance, and librarianship. He's published widely in this area with articles that explore diversity in different types of libraries, including leadership diversity, a study of urban public libraries and Library Quarterly, and managing diversity in liberal arts college libraries in college and research libraries. Haipeng's areas of expertise also extend to information literacy, assessment, civic engagement, and the future of libraries. In 2007, he wrote the book, Academic Libraries in the United States for the 21st Century, Theories and Practices. He regularly delivers presentations and keynote addresses in both US and China, and we're fortunate that he was able to come from Hong Kong to Greensboro today. So please join me in welcoming Haipeng. Thank you. Oh, one further note. This is being recorded thanks to Carrie from the LIS, and will be, there is a Ustream channel, and I will send out the email with that address to everybody.
Thank you, Kimberly. And thank you, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It feels a little chilly this morning compared with Hong Kong, which is about 80 degrees now. I'm still trying to get used to the Hong Kong weather, but it certainly it feels a little different here. And actually, it feels good to have this kind of chilliness there, which I want to see in Hong Kong, but I still yet to experience that. But thank you very much for having me here today. And I'm really glad that we are actually talking about diversity here again. This issue of diversity is dear to the hearts of a lot of library information professionals, and this particular topic is very well this topic is very well embraced, let's put it that way, in many areas of this profession. I'm going to approach it from a different perspective today. That is the international perspective. Since I'm in Hong Kong right now, so I'll be talking about this Hong Kong academic libraries and how my perception of diversity is working there to the best of my knowledge, because I haven't been there very long. I'm still trying to learn about everything, but that's what I'm going to do today. And I hope interrupt me if you have any questions. For those of us who have done work and research in the area of diversity in libraries, we all know that diversity is defined in many different ways. There are some narrow definitions. There are also some broad definitions. And we can, just for the definition of diversity, we can have a long debate. And we probably won't be able to finish in, tomorrow. It's a completely, a different topic on its own. So I'm not going to define diversity for today, but I do want to convey what we mean by diversity. So I looked at various definitions of diversity. So I came up with this loosely defined, broad definition of diversity. It's really, diversity is really about the differences. Differences among people as reflected in ethnicity, nationality, race, culture, religion, gender, sexual orientation, and so on and so forth. It's a, you can go on for, on and on. But really, I think the main point is the differences. And that's what I think diversity is all about. In 2000, actually we started in 1999. Some of you probably know Dr. Mark Winston, who used to be working right here at Chapel Hill in the library school there. He and I, we worked on a research project which resulted in a article called, Kimberly mentioned it, Managing Diversity in Liberal Arts College Libraries. In that article, we kind of looked at 4 major areas of diversity in libraries. And the 4 areas are, staffing issues, services, collections, and workplace climate. Now, again, for those of you who have been working in on issues related to diversity here in the U.S., mostly, I think most of the efforts have gone to staffing, workplace climate, environment, maybe to some extent services. There's minimal kind of efforts in collections, which doesn't mean diversity does not exist. So, these 4 areas were the basis for our research. And I have the citation right here, if any of you is interested in that. This is a map of Asia. Because I'm going to talk about Hong Kong academic libraries today, and coming from an international perspective, and I just wanted to get a sense of the people here. How many of you have been to Hong Kong? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, that's good. That's good. Because I asked the same question in other places, and maybe one or maybe 2 hands, would come up. I'm sure all of you have heard about Hong Kong, right? You can sort of see, this is a map of Asia, and I don't know how familiar are you with that part of the world. You can sort of see Hong Kong. It's a very tiny place right over here, with this arrow pointing to that little tiny region. So you can sort of see where it says Asia, underneath it says China. So you can we can take a look at the map for China. We often say China, the map of China looks like a rooster, and it does actually. With the head and then the tail and all of that. Can you find Hong Kong on this map? Of course. It's right over here. So you can see it's really in the further down south of China. And here's a map of Hong Kong. Hong Kong, really, it's all about islands. It's right next to the ocean. So you can see there's the Hong Kong island, there's the Lantau Island. And then over here, where it's at Kowloon, this is Kowloon Peninsula, really. So technically, Hong Kong is divided into 3 regions or districts. One is Hong Kong, which consists of Hong Kong Island and also Lantau Island. And then you have Kowloon, which is another district. And then you see the new territories right over here. And that's a larger area, very sparsely populated, whereas the rest of Hong Kong is very, very densely populated. So, so this is the map of Hong Kong. Here's a picture of Hong Kong, a lovely picture. Actually, this is a picture from my living room window. So I see this view every day. I don't have time to enjoy it, but I do like to look at this view. And actually, this is on the in the mountains high up. Those buildings that belong to the Chinese University of Hong Kong. And this whole area over here is a newly established what they call science park. So there is a lot of high-tech kind of stuff going on there. So this is in the new territories. Now this picture probably is, many of you have seen this picture, it's a typical picture of Hong Kong at night, all the lighting and all of that. And this is the International Financial Center on the Hong Kong Island. So you have this really interesting contrast of, really skyscrapers, high rises, but also you have, the nice, beautiful sceneries with mountains and ocean and all of that. And then here's another picture. I took this picture on the day of the Dragon Boat Festival. Hong Kong is very interesting. It's a very interesting combination of modern, highly developed metropolitan place, coupled with very deeply rooted traditional culture. So on the one hand, you have all these high rises, you have high tech going on, but you also have a lot of traditional stuff going on at the same time. So it's very interesting. So I can show you, the Dragon Boat. There were, every year during that day, they would have these kinds of competitions going on. Really, they want to preserve that aspect of the traditional culture there. So, in terms of location, it's in the southern part of China, and Hong Kong is unique in that it's quite different from other parts of Asia, because it was under the British rule for over 150 years. It was returned to China in 1997, and that was a very important date to remember for many people in Hong Kong and elsewhere, because it not only had impact on Hong Kong, but other parts of the world. For example, a lot of people, rich people in particular in Hong Kong, migrated to North America. A lot of them went to Canada, and some of them came into the U.S. So the Chinese government and the British government, they agreed together with the Hong Kong government that it would be one country, two systems. Basically, one country of China, and China was the socialist, system, and then Hong Kong was what they call the capitalist system. So they wanted both the British and also the people in Hong Kong. They wanted to preserve, keep the existing system that they had for a long time, and it was successful. So in this tiny space called Hong Kong, there are over 7 million people just imagine. And this space is only 404 square miles. You know, it's 6 times the size of Washington, D.C. But there are over 7 million people there. It's a very densely populated area. And the Hong Kong government is called the Special Administrative Region. In terms of higher education in Hong Kong, there are 13 degree awarding institutions. 8 of them are government funded. The rest are private institutions. Government funded meaning basically this government agency called University Grants Commission. That's the agency that's responsible for providing funding to these 8 institutions. And these are, as you can see, the Chinese University of Hong Kong, City University of Hong Kong, Hong Kong Baptist University where I am, Hong Kong Institute of Education, Hong Kong Polytechnic University, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, Lingnan University, and University of Hong Kong. Now this is a range in size. For example, there are 4 large universities, the Chinese University of Hong Kong, City University of Hong Kong, and Hong Kong Polytechnic University and University of Hong Kong. These 4, they have student population that's over 20,000. So these are larger institutions. There are also 3 medium-sized institutions, and those are Hong Kong Baptist University, Hong Kong Institute of Education, and Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. They have around 10,000 students. So we see them as sort of medium-sized institutions. And then Lingnan University is a liberal arts school. There are only, I think, maybe around 3,000 students. So there is a whole range of universities there in terms of size. But it's very interesting how these universities function and how these universities work together. I want to give you a sense of the student enrollment. As I indicated a little earlier, there are 4 larger institutions that have, over 20,000 students. That figure is tricky because higher education in Hong Kong is very complicated. By that I mean, people often refer Hong Kong higher education institutions using UGC, the University Grants Commission. UGC provides quota in terms of the number of students you could enroll each year. And the funding is based on headcounts. So if you have 10 students, then they provide funding for 10 students. And if you have 100, then they give you money for 100. But if you go beyond 100, then they stop right there. So universities in Asia, particularly in China and in Hong Kong, they're expanding hugely. Now, when they expand, where do they get the money? If the government says, I only allow you to enroll 1,000 students, but if you want to, enroll more, then, so they have developed all these self-financed programs. Now these finance programs are very fluid. They change all the time. They experiment with a program. If it works, they will continue. If it doesn't work, then they will stop. So as you can see, these UGC funded programs, the number actually is not that large. This is the total number of student enrollment for all 8 institutions. You can see hasn't changed very much since 2006 to today. It stays at the 72, 70, a little above 70,000 figure. The real change is with the self-financed programs. And because of the fluidity of these programs, it's very hard to actually get the exact figure on how many students each institution enrolls. Now, they also, have different levels. They call them differently. There is a sub-degree program. There is also undergraduate program. There is top graduate program, and also research graduate program. Sub-degree program mostly refers to AD, associate degree kind of programs. And undergraduate program is pretty much the same. Top graduate programs are usually master's level kind of programs, whereas research graduate is PhD level. So they just call them differently. This is, so when we look at our student figures here, we often look at their ethnic backgrounds, their demographic information and all that. Whereas in Hong Kong, they tend to separate them by local and non-local. Even for non-local students, there is more and more influx of students from mainland China to Hong Kong. So even though they share the same culture, they're not locally from Hong Kong. So they kind of divide, kind of separate that. So you can sort of see non-local foreign students actually is not very high. And this is pretty much all for UGC. And the reason being, Hong Kong government really wants to support Hong Kong residents, people, students who are from Hong Kong families. So, and that's why the number is not big under UGC funded programs. And that's what I mean by the numbers and questions. For UGC students, over 80% is local. So they want to have that focus, want to have that emphasis. For self-funded programs, then it gets tricky because of the the constant change. It's very difficult to get an accurate number or figure. But we know each institution, their self-funded programs and student enrollments actually doubles at least, their UGC figures. So that's very interesting, and there is no sign of decreasing. It's only going up. And also, with a lot of exchange programs that each institution has, there's 3+2. I don't know if you're familiar with these kinds of terms. 3+2, 2+2, which means they might have, for example, a partnership institution here in the U.S. and they would attend 3 years over there and 2 years over here, and they would get degrees from both institutions. And these programs are very popular now. A lot of U.S. institutions are doing these as well, particularly with China. Yes?
I have a question about the language of instruction in Hong Kong.
Yes.
With all these mainland Chinese students, so do you instruct in English or in Chinese?
This issue is a very, very interesting issue, and it warrants debate all the time. Very, very heated debate. But so far, all 8 institutions, government-funded institutions, require English as the medium of instruction. And we have debates on this all the time. I've been there for only 5 months. I've been through several big debates already about what do we do. There are programs that are very unique. For example, at my university there is a School of Chinese Medicine. Now, how do you do that in English? With the herbal, the Chinese names, and there is also there is a really good contemporary China studies. where they have, they study a lot of classical works of Chinese literature, for example. And it's very difficult to translate that into English. So, there are cases like that. So there's always this constant debate on the medium of instruction. For the 8 institutions, the libraries, we have a very tightly knit group called JULAC, and that is the Joint University Librarians Advisory Committee. The committee was established a long time ago, pretty much at the head of the university committee. All the presidents came together and said, well, we needed a committee like this to steer academic libraries in Hong Kong in the future. So that's why it was formed in 1967. The membership of JULAC is limited to the 8 institutions only, even though there are other institutions that want to join, but it's still under discussion and all of that. And JULAC is also, is very active in terms of participating in library, international library consortial entities. The overall steering committee of JULAC consists of the 8 library directors, university librarians. And then there are about 10 subcommittees. Now these 10 subcommittees, the members, actually each JULAC director chairs one committee. And then we only have 8 people, right? If you have 10. So 2 other committees are chaired by associate university librarians from these institutions. But anyway, the membership is from the 8 institutions. So actually the librarians, they have regular meetings, and they share and they communicate all the time. So here are just some of the collaborative projects that JULAC has done. There's this JURA, Joint Universities Research Archive, which has been going on for at least 10 years, to the best of my knowledge. So it's really a remote storage facility that's being considered by the Hong Kong government and also proposed by the 8 institutions. And there are some others. I'm not going to go through each one of them. So what I'm saying is that there is a lot of collaboration going on within this academic library network in Hong Kong. This is just a picture of the library of the Chinese University of Hong Kong. They're actually doing expansion of this building, which happens, in many places in Asia. And here's a picture of the main library of University of Hong Kong. These are huge buildings. And here is a picture of the Learning Commons at my university, where we sponsor events, learning events in that space all the time. So about, this is actually a very interesting time in Hong Kong, because there is a lot of changes that are happening there. The major change that is going to happen next year in 2012 is this change from the British education system to a US American education system. By that I mean it's really currently all the undergraduate programs are 3 years, similar to the British way system. So they're going to change it to a 4-year undergraduate curriculum, like what we do here. And that's going to happen next year. What that means is that next year, each institution is going to have double cohorts. For the 3-year program, it'll be the last cohort next year. and also it will be the first cohort for the 4-year program. So all of a sudden, we're going to double, our student numbers. So there is a lot of change. It's quite exciting actually, because of these changes. Hong Kong is I know in the U.S. a lot of institutions are trying to establish relationships with Chinese institutions now, and but it's been very difficult. When I was at Rutgers, the president actually initiated formed a task force to work on China's strategic initiative, basically collaboration with higher education institutions in China. But it's been difficult, being far away, but also not really knowing how the culture really works. In Hong Kong is different, because they share the same culture in many ways. So that's why a lot of university students, high school students, when they graduate, if they couldn't go to Europe or to the U.S., they end up in Hong Kong, and that's why the student population is growing, and mostly from China, and a lot of them are going into these self-funded programs. So it's very interesting. Yes.
Are these changes also happening in mainland universities? Is this a trend, or is it just exclusive to Hong Kong that the system has changed?
The system is just for Hong Kong, because in mainland China they have the 4-year system.
Okay. So,
Yeah, so they've been like that for a long time. It's just the Hong Kong education system. Still kind of follow the British,
okay.
that model.
Thanks.
Yeah. So what does it mean for us, in terms of diversity? Hong Kong traditionally, it's a mixture of cultures from East and West, and now there is more. There is a lot more to simply the East and West. We'll have more students. We're recruiting like crazy faculty. A lot of new faculty have been added to the various schools and divisions, and more courses. At my university, we're experimenting, well, not experimenting, but we're going in a direction already of offering more general education courses, more, liberal arts kind of foundational courses. And we did a calculation. Next year, we're going to offer like 230 new courses in general education. Just think about that. How much more work and how many new faculty you would have to conduct those courses. More library resources? I put a question mark there. I think we definitely will get some, but as you know, in the library world, it's tricky in academic institutions. Of course, everybody says the libraries are important, right? I think we will get some funding for the UGC students, the new students sponsored by the UGC programs, because there is a formula that's been developed already, but that's very limited. So we're still kind of trying to see what we can do with these challenges. Again, very interesting. When we're talking about diversity, and when we're talking about the culture, it's very, it reminds us who do work in diversity. You kind of being thrown into this kind of mode of doing comparisons. Comparing the cultures, comparing the various things. For me, I grew up in China, spent, my, undergraduate education there, and then I did some graduate work there. So I know the culture growing up, in that system. And then I worked in the U.S. for a long time, not only receiving the education, but also working in libraries. So I kind of observed, both kinds of environments. And it's very interesting when we talk about taking the initiative, taking leadership roles, and all of that. This is my favorite, when I do these quotes. When we talk about leadership issues, here, taking initiatives is really encouraged. You want people to take the leadership, take the initiative, and say what's on your mind. Just freely express your opinion. I think it's sort of like the culture that encourages that kind of free thinking and free will, and also to take a leadership position. Whereas in the Chinese culture, as you can see, in English we say squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? You have to speak. You have to say, this is what I want. You have to take the initiative. You have to take the leadership role if you want to make things happen. Whereas in the Chinese culture, things may be changing a little bit now because of the impact from all directions. But the traditional Chinese culture is really not encouraging people to take the initiative. And there is an old saying in Chinese that says the bird leading the way gets shot. So if you take the initiative, if you take the leadership role, you will be the one that gets killed. I'm maybe exaggerating, okay? but that's the idea. The culture doesn't encourage that. And it was interesting. I worked at a I wouldn't name the institution, but a U.S. institution where I had a colleague who was from Taiwan. He had been there for a long time, like 35 years or something like that. And when I communicate with him privately, he was very articulate. He was very good at talking. But then when we had meetings, for example, he usually would not speak up, even though he had good ideas. He was not used to that kind of environment. Speaking in public is not the thing that you would do in that culture. So he had good ideas, but he was very much misunderstood. People thought, he didn't have ideas. If he did, he probably would have spoken up. He grew up in a culture that did not encourage that. He grew up in that culture that actually, suppressed those kinds of things. So, when you understand these cultural elements, cultural context, you will understand people better. But back to Hong Kong, because it's Hong Kong, it's a really international city in a way. Even though that doesn't get reflected in the numbers of the students, like UGC funded or else. There are so many tourists going on, from all over the world because of this financial center in Asia. The other interesting thing that a lot of people may be not quite aware is that there are a lot of migrant workers. There are a huge population from the Philippines that are housemates. And we're often dealing with illegal immigrants here, and that's true over there too. a lot of them are come, without employment, visas, but a typical Hong Kong family would at least have one housemaid from the Philippines. So that there's a huge population. I think at least maybe 1 or 2 million, and that makes the city even smaller. It's highly congested, and you see them everywhere. So there is all this this kind of population, floating around, and in addition to already highly, intense, populated area, and Hong Kong is also expanding. Expanding probably not in terms of geographic areas, but in terms of business, in terms of education. Hong Kong is heavily relying on mainland China now for its business, and that's where every country, I guess, is going there, right? But really, and I'll get to the language issue in just a little bit, but it's very interesting, just to observe that in Hong Kong. There is no question that there is a fair amount of diversity among staffing in academic libraries. At the director's level, the university librarian level, Hong Kong is trying very hard to recruit from elsewhere. There are 8 institutions, and all the university librarians are from outside Hong Kong. 3 from Australia, 1 from UK, 3 from US, including myself, 1 from Taiwan. So it's very interesting, as you can see, and even at the university president, vice president level, they're also recruiting a lot of people from outside Hong Kong. But the staff, most of the staff, particularly support staff, they're from, most of them are local. But professional staff, for example, in my library, we have, staff from Australia, from Canada, from China, Hong Kong, UK, and US. So you have this really, really diverse staff. But it's very interesting, and I'll get to that. In terms of the collections, and I think this is true for my library, but I think it's true for other libraries as well, is that the collection is about 50-50. 1 or 2 libraries, I think, maybe the percentage are a little higher in English language materials. I think Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, they purchase more English language materials. And because of that, for the cataloging teams, we have a Chinese team. We also have an English team. So you kind of have to accommodate those kinds of needs. In terms of services, because the user population is changing, we have to address that, but not in the way that is happening here. Simply because in Hong Kong, as I indicated, a lot of the student population comes from mainland China. So in a way, the culture is similar, but it's still different because of the environments. And then in terms of the language issue, for our staff, particularly public services staff, they would have to be able to cope with that. They have to be multilingual, at least bilingual, I guess. So it's very interesting to see the interactions at the reference desk. We do have staff who only speaks English, and no Cantonese, no Mandarin. I still don't speak Cantonese. I can't speak Cantonese. So when my staff talks to me, they speak English. And we primarily conduct our meetings and everything in English.
Do all the support staff though, they're fluent in English? So all the people who are from Hong Kong basically are?
At higher education institutions, I would say yes. But if you go shopping, then that's different. You know, particularly in the streets, you know, you do, sometimes you feel like, I'm really challenged. Because you can't speak their language if they can't speak your language. That has happened to me several times. So, you know, I looked at several job postings. For example, you know, from the various institutions. For example, you know, I just took an excerpt from that. This is a reference position, and they do, you know, emphasize the language issue there. You know, you need English, Chinese, Mandarin. Chinese really means Cantonese here. And that's very important. And here's another one. This is an acquisitions position. And it also asks for written and spoken English and Chinese. So you can sort of see the language is really important in this environment. For the workplace, I'm sort of just looking at the major areas. In terms of workplace environment, I would say it's a very interesting place. Let's put it that way. In that there is a lot of respect actually that's happening within the library organization. I think they have a higher respect for authority, higher meaning than here. Not in a bad way, but a lot of the decisions are made from top down. You know, I have it down there. I'll get to that. And sometimes people just, you know, just take it. So in a way, that's, you know, that's respect, but also it's a part of the culture. You know, that's been like that for many years, and people are just kind of do it. And they have a lot of respect for each other. You know, staff, they care about each other. When I say Hong Kong is a very interesting place, it is indeed, in that, for example, my staff, they're very diligent, they're very hardworking, and they're very serious about their work. Let's put it that way. In Hong Kong, I think that, you know, they have very established ways of doing things. I think maybe following the British kind of system, and they, you know, have guidelines for almost everything. Much more than what we do here. So they follow the guidelines very closely, and sometimes to the extent they become very rigid about these guidelines. I'll give you an example. We sponsor a lot of events, learning events in the Learning Commons, and Student Affairs sponsors what they call CCL, co-curricular learning events, and these students can take these, can attend these events and take credit for these. And these are outside the classroom learning events, and we all agree, you know, this is wonderful because it provides an option for students to learn outside the classroom. And they're flexible, you know, and there's a whole variety of these kinds of events going on. But the events that we're doing in the Learning Commons, they're shorter. And the guideline says you have to have 90 minutes for each session. We all know students don't learn that way. 90 minutes, they fall asleep, you know, after the first 10 minutes. So we started talking to them and say, how can we build our learning events into these CCL events? Because we found out that students love these events if they come. They attend these and then they come back. But a lot of students, they don't come. So that's the thing. You have to attract them, find a way to get them here. And that's the challenge. So we thought, if we turn them into these CCL events, then that would be attracting more students to come. They said no, because these are 30 or 40 minutes. And when I started, our staff came up to me and said, we've been fighting this forever. It's just not happening. So I started some conversations with them. So we're still working on it. Let's put it that way. Let's put it that way. Yes, having guidelines are great. Rules, we can follow. But sometimes they don't allow this level of flexibility within these guidelines, which is actually works towards the disadvantage of our students. So then that's just one example. Again, in terms of comfort level, people in Hong Kong, they are like elsewhere in the Chinese context, they're better at one-on-one kind of relationships. They talk to you one-on-one. They have a lot to say. Sometimes you won't be able to even to stop them. But in group settings, they don't. They're just not used to that. So you have to understand that culture in order to find a way to make it work. It's very interesting. I found out after I started that every other institution is getting ready for 334 next year, and our library did not have a plan. Very interesting. It's going to happen next year, next September, and we don't have a plan. So I started asking these questions. I said, what are we going to do next year? And people said, well, we'll just do it. I said, how? Tell me how. But nobody could tell me how. And I said, look, our new students is going to double. Are we ready? And that's my question. I've been repeatedly asking that question. I said, are we ready for next year? And people are just kind of looking at me and said, maybe. Anyway, I said, well, I don't think that's a good idea just to say maybe, or we'll get there. So I said, well, let's have some discussions, okay? Let's just see what we can, how we can come up with a plan. And my staff asked me how are we going to do that? And I said, I think we need to have some brainstorm. Interestingly, quite a number of my staff actually have never heard of this term, brainstorming. And they said, well, if you are going to do that, nobody will say anything. Nobody will speak up at these meetings. And I said, okay, well, let's see what we can do. So I have the head of information services. She's from Canada, Diane. She's very good. She has facilitating skills, and she has been sort of serving as a moderator for a lot of these kinds of sessions. So I worked with her and coming up with a brainstorming kind of plan. So far we have had 2 of those. For the first one, it was interesting. We got everyone to talk. It was interesting because we didn't give them an option. We just said, well, let's do it. Let's just do it. So we went around, sitting at a round table, so everybody was expected to come up with one or two ideas. So for the first session, we had, I think it was a 2-hour session, we generated 92 ideas, which was a success. And then we sorted these ideas into 3 categories. One is long-term, the other is short-term, and then there is a middle category called in progress. And so we said we'll put aside the in progress ideas and also the long-term ideas. Let's focus on the short-term, because we have to get ready for next year. And we did. So the second session was focusing on the short-term ideas, and then we expanded on that. Had a lot more in-depth kind of discussions focusing on these issues. And then there was a 334 planning committee already in place, which was dormant for a long time. So I put it back to work. So right now the committee is reviewing all these suggestions and ideas, and we will have a plan. And the plan, I give them a deadline for the end of December. So we will have a plan at the end of December, and then we'll take actions in January. But again, you know, you have to be able to function in a culture that is different from the one that you're used to. You have to understand that situation, and you have to work, you know, with what you have in that kind of situation. There are some projects actually that are going on within the academic library kind of environment that touch, you know, these projects that touch on the issues of diversity, for example, demographic kind of information and so on and so forth. There is a very high level of interest in doing an ethnographic study of Hong Kong University students, focusing on their learning and research behaviors. And every institution is already committed to carrying this out. And so that means if we don't get funding from UGC or somewhere else, each institution will chip in, and we will do that. The Next Gen Leadership Program is also focused on academic libraries. It's by an Australian company that has done some training. There's also a leadership institute that's done by the University of Hong Kong libraries. So there are, you know, these programs all address some aspects of diversity within their programs. There is also other projects that are kind of happening that are not really focused on libraries. Recently there was a study done actually last month by a couple faculty members in my institution on career perspectives of students, both from Hong Kong and from elsewhere, from mainland mostly. Interesting studies. I want to conclude by saying, you know, as you have seen, Hong Kong is a fascinating place. It's really the junction of different kinds of cultures where they meet. Sometimes it's all mixed together, sometimes it's quite distinct. So you have this environment that is not like China, not like US, not like, you know, not like anywhere. So it's really unique on its own. And you feel the diversity there when you're in Hong Kong, because, you know, the people that you see, the language they speak, It's just, it's just everywhere. However, diversity as a concept is really not talked about, like what we do here in the U.S. The profession, library profession here in the U.S., is very, embracing this issue of diversity and also pushing for a lot of programs to happen to address some of these issues, like the ACE program that we have here, that are wonderful. But really, not very much is really discussed. It's kind of feels like diversity is kind of just happens and people just deal with it. Very interesting. So I think it might be interesting to do a comparative study of diversity in US and diversity in Hong Kong or maybe in Asia and elsewhere. It would be interesting, and actually I think it would be significantly contributing to the literature. So that's the end of my talk. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
I have a question. I'm really curious about, I guess, the economic backgrounds of the students and the ones who are self-funded. Are they coming from wealthier families? And is economic difference, I guess, among the students very visible?
Absolutely, yeah. These self-funded programs, the university doesn't pay anything, no scholarships, nothing, and students have to come up with the money on their own, and they can afford it. Yes, with China getting economically stronger and stronger, so are the people. The people are getting richer. There is a huge discrepancy in terms of economic situations for people in China. There's still a lot of farmers that are really poor, a lot of unemployment there. But overall, a lot more people are getting richer, have the resources to pay for education of their kids. And, focusing on education is a tradition in I guess, not just Chinese culture, in Asian culture in general. If they could, afford their kids' education, they will do it. Families tend to make those kinds of decisions. So in a way, even though they may not, have the money, they still will try to find the money to support these kids. Yes.
Kind of on the same lines, I was curious about, okay, you'd spoken about basically 4 groups, local, Chinese, other Asia, and then outside Asia, UGC versus self-funded. What is the cost of higher education there, and do different groups get different levels, like here, in-state versus out-of-state? Private charges a lot for everybody.
Yeah, for the UGC programs, they're not only supported by the government, but actually they offer a lot of scholarships, universities, to these students, unlike the self-funded students. For self-funded students, they're pretty much on their own, and the cost of tuition is pretty high. Let's put it that way. There are, I think, as I indicated in my talk, most of the UGC students are from Hong Kong, locally, and the government wants to support these kids, want them to be successful. So when they recruit, there's really no in-state or out-state kind of difference there. So when they want to make sure that the kids from Hong Kong, they are successful. They don't necessarily have to face this kind of competition from outside. They want to make sure that they take care of their own kids first before they can, do anything else. So for Hong Kong students, I think there's a fair amount of support there in terms of cost. But for self-funded, they're pretty much on their own. Did I address your?
Yeah, so basically, if you're not from Hong Kong, it doesn't really matter where you're from. It's going to be high.
It really depends on the program,
Okay.
whether it's a self-funded program or it's a UGC program. There are quite a number of students from outside the China area, Greater China area. You know, students from the U.S., students from UK, a lot of students from Europe. You know, sometimes they share those kinds of scholarships and fellowships as well. Yes.
The sub-degree programs that you talked about, I had a conversation with somebody at IFLI. I do research about community college libraries here in the United States. And so are the sub-degree programs like our community college system?
Very much so.
Okay. He indicated that system is kind of growing.
Very much so.
Okay.
Yeah, because a lot of people, they want employment. They want to learn skills that would get them jobs. So they go through these 2-year programs and very fast track, and then they're equipped with those skills and so that they can find jobs. Yes, it's growing.
You mentioned earlier that most of the administrative positions in libraries and professional library positions are reserved pretty much for internationals, or you are actively recruiting international librarians?
For professional level librarians, yes. A lot of these positions are advertised internationally.
And how long this has been going on?
It's been going on for a while. I don't know exactly, but I think it's been going on for a while.
My question is because if such positions are advertised internationally and oftentimes recruit international librarians for such positions, how the STEM would react to seeing this higher administrative higher level positions are kind of like occupied by oftentimes internationals. You're trying to promote diversity, I can understand that, but on the other hand, from the STEM perspective, they are mostly locals, and they are seeing that this high level position, most of the better paying positions are reserved for others.
Right. That's a good question. My sense is that they're more or less used to this kind of situation because of the colonial system. It used to be a lot of British, being in higher positions, and the Chinese were all, it doesn't matter how much education you had, I guess, for a long time. So there were, in Hong Kong, and this is not true in mainland China or in Taiwan. This is typical, very unique in Hong Kong. And so because of that colonization going on for many, many years, they didn't tell me exactly, this is true, but that's my sense. But Hong Kong government really wants to internationalize Hong Kong higher education. So they actively recruit, and people just, I think people take it. People just think that it's necessary, and that's what makes Hong Kong unique. Sure, the staff will see, there's someone from the U.S., coming all of a sudden, being, the head of the library, making more money than we do, and who even doesn't speak our language. But I think they cope with it, and that's the aspect, that's the kind of diversity that I was trying to convey to you, that there's that level of diversity. People kind of feel it, and they cope with it because it's there, and they have to deal with it. rather than here you're really looking for options and proactively trying to address those issues. So it's quite different in that sense. Claire.
Kind of to add to the response, I know some people who are former students of mine who work in Hong Kong. One of them works with Haipeng, and I think the sense is that the international presence is the authority that they embrace. So the person brings prominence to the institution. So they just kind of recognize that they would be able to take that spot, but they welcome somebody to provide that leadership that would come.
Yes. Again, they just accept that. And they also want from the higher administration. That's where they want to get. They want to bring people from outside who bring new ideas, bring changes, although changes are hard. So they want these kinds of influence, and that's they know that's what that's what makes Hong Kong unique and different from other places.
Oh, I do have a question. I'm interested in the issue of classification and categorization because you mentioned Hong Kong students versus other students. So would Hong Kong students be anyone born in Hong Kong regardless of ethnicity? Because I know that there are people of different ethnic backgrounds, from Indian background and so forth, who are Hong Kong born.
Yeah, I think if you're a Hong Kong resident, and that's how it's defined. You have a Hong Kong ID card. Mainland Chinese students, they're considered non-local students, so they don't necessarily are residents of Hong Kong. I think that's how it's defined. I don't know for sure, but I believe that's how it's done.
And so do you sense any concerns in terms of intercultural relations, if there is any discrimination that's unspoken of, or people considering that, we're Hong Kong, we're better, even though we're Chinese background, we're better than the mainland Chinese? Are there any issues of that type?
The study that I showed on the career perspectives is an interesting study because I surveyed both Hong Kong students and students from mainland. And you can see from Hong Kong students' perspective, they see this huge competition. They're threatened because their jobs will be taken away by these mainland students. But it's a mixture of reactions to this situation. On the one hand, they're kind of intimidated by this increased population from mainland China. On the other hand, they see this as a economic boom because of the rise of China. And these students come here, they can actually bring these kinds of opportunities. And from mainland Chinese students' perspective, a lot of them want to stay in Hong Kong after they graduate because the higher salary, because the just the excitement and dynamic nature of this place. So it's very interesting to see that. I didn't experience this, but I was told by some of the faculty there that moved to Hong Kong maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and they experienced a lot of discrimination. For a long time, Hong Kong people in Hong Kong refused to learn Mandarin, and if you speak Mandarin, they don't even talk to you. It's that level of they just don't want to talk to mainland Chinese. But things are changing, and they know Hong Kong right now is depending on China in its economic progress. So everybody in Hong Kong is learning Mandarin. Everybody, although some are better than others. I think most of my staff, they speak Mandarin, although they don't speak Mandarin to me for some reason. But it's very interesting. I think things are changing. You know, the dynamic is changing with this greater Chinese region. Very interesting.
Well, I know we're a little past time, but I'm wondering, we can stay and maybe talk informally with coffee and cookies for a little bit. I know some people need to get back, but thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Kimberly.
I have a question. I'm curious, so the migrant workers, do they tend to go back to the Philippines with their kids, or do their kids stay, and do the kids have opportunities?
A lot of these young